The untouchable alien queen. In a galaxy far from Earth, there was a planet called Xypheron, where an alien queen ruled with absolute power. She was known to be untouchable, and no one dared to challenge her reign. Her name was Queen Zorath, a being of immense beauty and strength. Feared by all who crossed her path, Queen Zorath's people had a strict rule. No one, not even the bravest warrior, could come near her without facing severe punishment. She lived in a grand palace, surrounded by her elite guards, each one chosen for their skill and loyalty. They were known to be merciless, striking down anyone who dared to step out of line. The queen's power was unmatched, and she ruled with an iron fist, ensuring that her kingdom was safe and prosperous. The citizens of Xypheron lived in awe of her. They whispered her name with both fear and respect, for she was not just a ruler, but a symbol of strength. Her eyes glowed with the light of 1,000 stars, her long silver hair flowing like the rivers of time. She was as beautiful as she was deadly. Her presence alone could silence even the loudest crowds, and her voice, though soft, could command armies. But there was something about Queen Zorath that no one truly understood. Despite her beauty and power, she was always surrounded by an air of loneliness. The palace was vast, but it was empty. No one was allowed close enough to speak with her to understand the woman behind the crown. Some even said that her heart had grown cold from years of isolation, locked away in a golden cage of her own making. Others whispered that she was a prisoner of her own power, trapped in a world where she could trust no one in the city below the palace. A young human named Kael walked through the crowded streets, his heart filled with a mix of awe and curiosity. He had heard the stories of Queen Zorath, the untouchable queen, who could crush any enemy with a single command. He had also heard the whispers of her loneliness, of how no one had ever dared to speak to her as a person, not just a ruler. Kael was different. He wasn't like the others. While the people of Xypheron feared Queen Zorath, Kael felt pity for her. He wondered what it would be like to be so powerful, yet so alone. What kind of life would it be to live in a palace full of guards, but no friends? What would it be like to be untouchable, to have no one to trust or love? One evening, as the sun began to set and the stars slowly appeared in the sky, Kael stood at the edge of the city, gazing up at the towering palace in the distance. It was a majestic sight, with its shining walls and floating towers, but to Kael, it looked like a prison. The queen, surrounded by her guards and her wealth, was still isolated. She was untouchable, unreachable, but Kael couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing from her life. He had heard the stories. Some said that no human had ever dared to approach the queen. The guards were too strong, the palace too well guarded. Anyone who tried to get close to her would be killed on the spot. But Kael was determined. He wanted to see the queen for himself, to speak to her, to understand who she truly was. Maybe, just maybe, he could be the one to break through the walls she had built around herself. That night, as Kael lay in bed, he made a decision. He would go to the palace. He would try to speak with Queen Zorath, to break through her untouchable image. He didn't know how he would do it, but he knew that he had to try. He couldn't stand the thought of someone so powerful being so alone. As he prepared for his journey, Kael's heart raced. He didn't know what to expect or what would happen when he finally stood before the queen. But one thing was certain. This was the beginning of something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. He was about to defy the rules of Xypheron, to challenge the untouchable. The story of Queen Zorath was about to change forever. And Kael was the one who would change it. The first step was to get past the guards. But Kael wasn't afraid. His curiosity, his desire to understand the Queen, gave him courage. He had no idea what the future held, but he was ready to face whatever came next. And so, under the glow of the twin moons, Kael made his way toward the palace. His heart pounded with excitement and fear, but he knew that this was the only way. To break the silence, Queen Zorath, the Untouchable, was about to meet the one human who dared to defy her. The human's bold decision the following day, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, casting an orange glow across the barren desert landscape. Kael stood at the edge of the city once more. His heart pounded in his chest as he gazed up at the massive walls of the Queen's palace. It seemed even more intimidating up close. The towering spires and shimmering surface of the palace looked like something out of a dream or a nightmare. To the people of Xypheron, it was a symbol of power, strength, and fear. To Kael, it was a barrier between him and the truth about the Queen. Kael had never felt more certain about something in his life. His decision was made. He would go to her, even if it meant breaking every rule of the planet. For weeks, he had been hearing whispers about Queen Zorath's isolation, her untouchable status. The people of Xypheron lived in fear of her, but Kael felt a strange pull towards her. She was a ruler, yes, but beneath that facade, there had to be a person, someone who felt loneliness, who might need someone to reach out to her. He thought back to the stories he had heard from the older citizens. They said that Queen Zorath's guards were unmatched, that no one could get close to her. But Kael wasn't like the others. He wasn't just another frightened citizen following the rules. He was someone who saw beyond the surface. If the Queen was truly as powerful as everyone said, then why was she alone? Why was she untouched by the very people who feared her? Kael had to know the answer. He had to see her for himself. The thought of crossing the boundary that no one else dared to was both terrifying and thrilling. If he succeeded, it would be an incredible story. If he failed, it could be the end of him. But Kael wasn't afraid of what would happen to him. He feared more the thought of never knowing who the Queen really was, of never understanding the isolation she must feel. That afternoon, Kael packed a small bag with essentials, a few snacks, a map, and his most trusted tool, a small, lightweight device that could help him bypass simple security systems. He had heard that the palace was filled with advanced technology and defenses, but Kael was a skilled tech expert. He had spent years studying the systems of Xypheron's cities, and now it was time to put that knowledge to the test. As he stood at the gates of the palace, hidden behind a row of tall rock formations, Kael's mind raced. He had done all his research. He knew about the palace's layout, the routines of the guards, and the advanced locks on the palace doors. But all of that felt irrelevant now. All that mattered was that he had made a decision, and there was no turning back. He took a deep breath and adjusted his cloak, concealing himself as much as possible. He was no longer just a curious human. He was someone on a mission to defy the rules, to challenge the untouchable. He stepped forward. The path leading to the palace was quiet, almost too quiet. The dusty ground beneath his feet felt solid, but Kael could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears. As he approached the first set of gates, he saw the guards standing at their post store, imposing figures with glowing helmets and their armor gleaming under the setting sun. They were statuesque, almost robotic in their stillness. Kael's heart skipped a beat as he approached the first checkpoint. This was at the moment where everything could fall apart. If the guards saw him, it would be over. But Kael had a plan. He pulled out his device, quickly scanning the security system near the entrance. With a soft click, the sensors went dark. He couldn't help but smile to himself. He had done it. The first hurdle had been cleared. He moved quickly, his steps light and measured as he followed the path toward the inner courtyard of the palace. The guards were still oblivious to his presence, and Kael marveled at how easy it was to slip past them unnoticed. He had expected more resistance, more danger, but for now, luck was on his side. As Kael moved deeper into the palace, the once quiet air grew heavy with the sounds of distant machinery humming. The palace was vast, and the walls seemed to stretch endlessly toward the sky. He had heard stories about the palace's grandeurs, towering spires, floating platforms, and grand halls, but seeing it up close was a different experience entirely. The walls were made of polished metal, reflecting light in strange and mesmerizing ways. The entire place seemed to pulse with energy, alive with power. Finally, Kael reached the main corridor, the one that led directly to the Queen's chamber. The guards posted here were even more formidable than the ones he had passed. They stood in pairs, their faces hidden behind masks that were both intimidating and eerie. Kael's heart pounded again as he considered his next move. He had come this far, there was no turning back now. He couldn't afford to hesitate. He quickly scanned the area and found a small alcove to hide in. As the guards passed, Kael held his breath, waiting for the perfect moment. Finally, as the last of the guards walked by, Kael darted from his hiding spot, moving swiftly and silently towards the door at the end of the hall. His heart raced, but his mind remained focused. He could do this. As he reached the door to the Queen's private chamber, he paused. This was the moment that would define everything. What if she didn't want to be disturbed? What if the Queen was just as cold and ruthless as everyone said? But Kael pushed those doubts aside. He wasn't here to be afraid. He was here to change everything. With a deep breath, Kael entered the Queen's chamber, and the world would never be the same again. Breaking through the guards, the door creaked open slowly, and Kael stepped into the dimly lit chamber. The moment he crossed the threshold, the weight of the silence in the room struck him like a wave. The air was thick with an otherworldly tension, and every step he took felt like a defiance of the natural order. Inside, the Queen's chamber was breathtaking, a large, circular room adorned with intricate alien symbols that glowed faintly on the walls. The floor was smooth, made of some unknown material that shimmered under the soft light. But despite its beauty, there was something cold about the room, something that made Kael feel like an intruder. At the center of the room stood Queen Zora. She was even more magnificent than Kael had imagined. Her blue skin shimmered under the soft lighting, and her long silver hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. Her eyes glowed a soft violet, and they seemed to pierce through Kael, as if she could see right through his soul. She stood tall and proud, her armor gleaming with intricate designs that seemed to tell stories of battles fought and victories won. There was no mistaking her power. She was a queen, untouchable in every way. But what Kael wasn't prepared for was the loneliness that seemed to radiate from her. The way she stood there, as if waiting for something, someone, for a moment. Kael hesitated. He had come all this way, but now that he was standing in front of her, he felt a wave of doubt. Before he could speak, her voice, smooth and melodic, broke the silence. "Why are you here, human?" Her tone was calm, yet there was an edge of authority in it. "Do you not know the punishment for trespassing in my domain?" Kael swallowed hard. He had practiced what he would say, but now, faced with the queen, the words felt empty. He had no idea how to begin this conversation, how to bridge the gap between their worlds. But he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't turn back now. Kael began, his voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to speak with you, to understand who you really are, not just the ruler everyone fears. There was a long pause. For a moment, Kael thought she might dismiss him, or worse, order him to be arrested or killed. But to his surprise, she didn't. Instead, she tilted, her head slightly, studying him with those violet eyes. You want to understand me? She asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Do you think that is possible? Do you think a human could ever truly understand what it is to rule this empire? To live with the weight of a crown that no one else dares to wear? Kael didn't answer immediately. He stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, as if testing the waters. He had come this far, and now he needed to take that next step. I think everyone deserves to be understood, he said, his voice gaining strength. Even you. The queen's expression remained unreadable. But Kael could sense a shift in the air, as though she was considering his words. The silence between them grew longer, and Kael could feel the weight of her gaze on him. He wasn't sure what she was thinking, but, for the first time, he didn't feel the need to fill the silence. He just waited. Finally, the queen spoke again, her voice softer this time. You have courage, human. Most would not dare to speak to me in this way, let alone enter my chamber uninvited. She took a step forward, and for the first time, Kael saw a faint trace of emotion in her eyes, perhaps curiosity, or something deeper. But courage alone will not save you from the consequences of your actions. Kael nodded, his heart racing. I'm not afraid of the consequences. He hesitated, trying to find the right words. I want to know who you are beyond the rumors. I want to know why you're so alone, despite having all this power. The queen's eyes flickered for a brief moment, a fleeting sign of something. Vulnerable, something human. But it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. You think I am alone? She asked, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. I have everything anyone could want: power, wealth, control, and yet none of it means anything. I am trapped in my own empire, surrounded by walls of my making. Do you understand what that feels like? Kael couldn't answer her question, but he felt a pang of sympathy for her. He had come here expecting to find a tyrant, a cold ruler who ruled with an iron fist. But now, standing in front of her, he realized that the queen was not just a symbol of power, she was a prisoner of it, a prisoner of her own strength. For the first time, Kael saw the queen not as a ruler to be feared, but as a person who had been shaped by the very power she wielded. She had been forced to become untouchable, to push everyone away in order to protect herself and her throne. The very thing that made her strong also kept her isolated. Kael took a deep breath. This was his chance. The queen had opened up, even if just a little. Now it was up to him to continue the conversation, to show her that he wasn't just another person afraid of her power. I don't understand what it's like to be a queen, Kael said slowly, but I do understand loneliness. No one should have to live like that, not even you. You deserve more than just power. You deserve to be seen. The queen stared at him, her eyes searching his face. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence, and Kael began to wonder if he had said the wrong thing. But then, to his surprise, she spoke again. Perhaps, she whispered, almost to herself, Perhaps you are right. It was a small shift, but it was enough to make Kael believe that maybe, just maybe, he had begun to break through her walls. And, with that, the story between the Queen and the human had only just begun. The first meeting, the room fell silent again as the Queen Zorath, stood motionless before Kael. Her glowing violet eyes locked onto his, with an intensity that made him feel as though she was peering into the very core of his being. The tension in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. Kael's heart raced, and for a moment, he wondered if he had made a mistake by coming this far. What was he doing here, standing before the ruler of an entire empire? But then, the Queen spoke, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "You have no idea what you're asking for, human," she said, her tone quieter now, almost as if speaking to herself. "To be seen, to be understood. It comes with consequences. And yet, here you are, standing before me, wanting to understand." Kael's pulse quickened, but he refused to step back. He had come this far. He wasn't about to let fear take over now. "I don't care about the consequences. I'm here because I believe you deserve someone who sees more than just the Queen everyone fears." Queen Zorath's eyes narrowed, but there was a glimmer of something softer in them now. She seemed to consider his words for a long moment, as if weighing them against the countless others she had heard over the years. "You are a rare human," she murmured, almost as if to herself. "Most would fear me, beg for mercy, or run away at the sight of my guards. But you stand before me without fear." "I'm not afraid of you," Kael replied, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding in his chest. "I'm here because I want to understand you, the real you." For a long time, Queen Zorath didn't speak. She simply stared at him, her face unreadable. Kael could see the weight of centuries of solitude in her gaze, as though she had never been seen or understood for who she truly was. She had lived a life of power and isolation, and that had shaped her into someone untouchable, someone distant from the very people she ruled. Kael took a step forward, but not too close. He respected her space. "I know that I don't belong here," he said softly. "But I wanted to at least try. I wanted to see if there's more to you than the Queen everyone fears." There was another long silence. The Queen's eyes flickered, just for a moment, with something Kael couldn't quite place. It was a mixture of curiosity and sorrow, as though she was deciding whether to let down the walls she had built around herself. Finally, she spoke again, her voice low and tinged with a deep, unspoken sadness. "I have never been seen for who I truly am, Kael. People see the Queen, the ruler, the conqueror. They see power and fear. But no one sees the woman behind the throne. No one understands the burden of what it means to rule." Kael didn't know what to say to that. He had never ruled a planet, never known the weight of a crown, but he did understand the pain of being misunderstood, of being judged by what others saw on the surface. "I don't know what it's like to be a queen," Kael said gently, "but I do know what it's like to feel alone. I know what it's like to feel like no one truly sees you." Queen Zorath's gaze softened, just slightly, as she stepped closer to Kael. "You think you know loneliness, human?" she asked, her voice still low but no longer harsh. "You think you can understand what it's like to live in a cage of your own making, to have no one trust you, no one care about you, because they all fear the power you wield?" Kael's throat tightened. He wasn't sure how to respond, but he knew one thing: he wasn't here to argue with her. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to listen. "Yes," he said quietly, his voice sincere. "I think I do understand." For a brief moment, there, was a flicker of something in the queen's eyes, a mixture of disbelief and hope, as though she didn't know whether to believe him or not. She was a queen, untouchable in every way, yet here was this human standing before her, speaking the words she had longed to hear. Kael stood his ground, his heart heavy with empathy. He had no idea what it would take to truly break through her walls, to show her that she didn't have to be alone. But he was determined to try. For the first time in years, Queen Zorath felt something stir inside her, longing, perhaps, for something she had forgotten. Her gaze softened, and the faintest of smiles tugged at the corners of her lips. "You are bold," she said, her voice still tinged with a hint of skepticism. But there was something else there, now something like a crack in the armor she had worn for so long. "But there is much you do not know about me, Kael, about the price of power, the price of being untouchable." "I don't care about the price," Kael replied, his voice steady. "I care about you, the real you, not the queen, not the ruler. The person." The queen's eyes searched his face for a long moment, as though looking for any sign of deception. But all she saw was sincerity. And for the first time, the queen let herself believe that perhaps this human truly meant what he said. Kael didn't know what would happen next, but he was willing to stay, to keep pushing past the walls she had built around herself. He wasn't just here to see the queen. He was here to help her see herself for who she truly was. And in that moment, something shifted. The untouchable queen wasn't so untouchable anymore. For the first time, she had met someone who refused to be afraid of her. The hidden truth, the silence between Kael and Queen Zorath grew thick, as if the weight of their conversation had drawn a veil over the room. Neither of them spoke for a long while. Kael, unsure of what else to say, simply stood there, waiting for the queen to speak again. Her eyes, though still glowing with power, now seemed more contemplative, as if the walls around her heart were slowly crumbling, piece by piece. Finally, Queen Zorath exhaled sharply, the softest hint of vulnerability flickering in her eyes. "You want to understand me, human?" Her voice was calm, but the tremor in it was unmistakable. "You want to know why I am the way I am? Then you must understand the truth." Kael nodded, his heart racing with anticipation. This was what he had been waiting for. This was the moment when the queen would finally open up to him. He wasn't sure what she would say or how it would change everything, but he was ready. For the first time, he believed she was willing to let him in. The queen paced slowly across the room, her long silver hair trailing behind her like a shimmering cloud. "I was not always this way," she began, her voice tinged with sorrow. "I was once a young ruler, eager to prove myself to my people. I wanted to be more than just the daughter of the previous king. I wanted to be a queen who would be remembered, one whose reign would be marked by strength and wisdom." Kael remained silent, listening intently as the queen continued her story. But in the process of seeking power, she said softly, "I lost something far more important. I lost my connection to those I ruled. I became consumed by the need for control, the need for authority, and in doing so, I pushed everyone away, my allies, my friends, even my own people." Her voice cracked, and Kael could see the pain in her eyes. The queen paused, her gaze distant, as if lost in the past. She seemed to be reliving a time when things had been different, when she had been just another person, unburdened by the weight of a crown. "There are those who would say that I am untouchable because of my power," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "But the truth is, I am untouchable because I have made myself that way. I have built walls around my heart, around my life, so high and so thick that no one could ever get close. I pushed away anyone who might have cared, anyone who might have shown me kindness, because I feared what they might take from me. Kael's chest tightened as he listened. He had never expected to hear these words from the Queen. He had come here thinking she was simply a ruler, a symbol of power. But now he saw the cracks in her armor. He saw the person beneath it all, the woman who had been shaped by fear, by the very power that had made her a queen. But why? Kael asked, his voice gentle. Why did you feel the need to shut everyone out? The Queen turned to face him, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and regret. Because, Kael, I feared losing everything. The moment I allowed myself to be vulnerable, to let someone close, I feared they would take my power, my throne. I feared that if I let them in, they would see me as weak. And weakness in a ruler is unforgivable. It is the one thing that can destroy a kingdom, that can destroy everything I've worked for. Her words struck Kael deeply. He had always believed that strength meant never showing weakness, never allowing anyone to see your vulnerability. But now, standing before the Queen, he realized that strength wasn't about building walls around yourself. It wasn't about hiding who you really were. It was about having the courage to let someone in, to trust. Kael stepped forward slowly, his eyes softening as he looked at her. But you're not weak, Zorath. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You've ruled an entire empire. You've protected your people. That's not weakness. The Queen met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and disbelief. For the first time in a long time, she seemed to allow herself to feel something other than the weight of her crown. You would say that, even after everything I've done, after the choices I've made. Kael nodded firmly. You're not defined by your past, Zorath. You're not defined by the mistakes you've made. You're defined by the choices you make now, and right now, you're choosing to share your truth with me. That takes real strength. For a long moment, the Queen remained silent, her eyes searching Kael's face, as though trying to read him, to understand his sincerity. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft, but filled with an emotion Kael had never heard from her before. Do you think there is a chance for me to change? To stop being the ruler everyone fears, and start being the person I was meant to be? Kael smiled gently, his heart swelling with compassion. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that you're not alone anymore. I'm here, and maybe, together, we can find a way to break the walls that keep you trapped. The Queen's eyes shimmered with something Kael couldn't quite place, hope, perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of the person she had once been before the crown and the power had shaped her into something else. She took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. Perhaps, she whispered, almost to herself, there is a way out after all. As Kael stood before her, he realized that this was just the beginning of something far greater than either of them could have ever anticipated. Together, they would face the truth of her reign, and the path to change would not be easy. But with each passing moment, the Queen's walls were starting to crumble, piece by piece, and Kael, the human who had dared to defy her, would be the one to help her rebuild. Unlikely allies, the weeks that followed felt like a blur to Kael. What had started as a single, daring act of defiance had blossomed into something he could never have expected. Queen Zorath, the untouchable ruler of Xypheron, had begun to change. Slowly but surely, the walls she had built around herself, walls of power, fear, and loneliness were coming down, and in their place, a new connection was being forged between them. one born not of duty or obligation, but of understanding. Zorath had not immediately trusted Kael. That much was clear. But with each passing day, as they spoke more and more, he could see her beginning to question everything she had believed in. She had spent so long convincing herself that power was all that mattered, that control over her people, her empire, was her sole purpose. But Kael had shown her another path, one where strength was not about fear, but about vulnerability. He had made her realize that there was more to life than a crown, more to her existence than the walls of her palace. Kael had always known that defying the queen would be dangerous, but what he hadn't expected was the quiet bond that had begun to form between them. They spoke about everything, about their fears, their dreams, the mistakes they had made in their lives. For the first time, Zorath seemed willing to let someone see her for who she truly was, not just as a ruler, but as a person. One evening, as they stood together on one of the palace's many balconies, looking out over the vast, starry desert of Xypheron, Zorath spoke in a quiet, almost distant voice. "There are many who would say that I have already lost the trust of my people," she said, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "They fear me. They see me as a tyrant, as a ruler who will never allow anyone to get close. Perhaps they are right." Kael turned to face her, his eyes soft with understanding. "They don't understand you, Zorath. They never have. But that doesn't mean you have to stay the way you are. You've started to see that, haven't you?" Zorath's eyes met his, her violet gaze intense but no longer cold. "I don't know if I can ever be who I was before, the person I once was, before all of this." She waved a hand at the sprawling palace, at the empire she had built and now questioned. "How can I undo the years of fear and power? How can I fix the mistakes I've made?" Kael stepped closer, his voice steady and filled with conviction. "You don't have to undo anything, Zorath. You just have to choose to move forward. You've started already. You've begun to let go of the things that held you back. And maybe, just maybe, that's all you need to do." Zorath looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the fine lines of her armor. "But what if I can't change? What if I'm too far gone, too trapped in this role to be anything but the queen?" "You're not trapped," Kael replied firmly. "You can always choose your own path. It might not be easy, but it's yours to make. And I'm here to help you, every step of the way." For the first time in many years, Zorath allowed herself to believe him. She had always been the ruler of her people, the untouchable queen. But Kael had shown her a different kind of strength. It was the strength to break free from the past, to embrace something new, something real. "I don't know what the future holds," Zorath said quietly, "but for the first time in a long while, I'm willing to find out. With you." Kael smiled, a sense of pride swelling within him. He hadn't come here to change the queen. He had come to understand her, to see her for who she truly was. And in doing so, he had unknowingly given her the courage to start a new chapter in her life. But their journey wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "I know we can do this," Kael said softly, "but it won't be easy. There are still many who won't accept the change you're making. There will be enemies, both within your kingdom and beyond. They will fight to keep you in the role they've created for you, but we can face them together." Zorath looked at him, a newfound determination in her eyes. "Together," she repeated, as if the word had new meaning now. And so, the alliance between the human and the queen began. It was not a traditional alliance, nor one born of politics or necessity. It was an alliance forged in the crucible of their shared humanity, in the understanding that power was not the answer to everything, and that even the most untouchable could still find a way to reach out. But their enemies, those who saw Queen Zorath's change as a threat to their own power, would not let them go without a fight. And soon, Kael and Zorath would find themselves facing more than just political struggles. They would face a battle for their very survival. The true test of their alliance was just beginning. The final standard days following their conversation had been filled with quiet but meaningful steps forward. Zorath, no longer content with just ruling from behind her walls, began to take a more active role in shaping the future of Xypheron. She ventured out of her palace more often, engaging with her people in ways that felt natural and freeing, no longer just the untouchable queen, but a leader willing to listen, to learn, and to grow. Yet, despite the subtle changes that were slowly transforming the empire, not everyone shared the queen's new vision. Those who had thrived under her old reign, those who depended on her isolation to maintain their own power, began to take notice. Whispers of rebellion started to spread throughout the palace's corridors, and enemies, both internal and external, began to stir. Kael and Zorath knew the time was coming. Their enemies would not sit idly by while she changed the rules that had kept them in power. They had already begun to challenge her authority, to question her leadership. The queen, once untouchable, was now vulnerable, and they would stop at nothing to take back control. One evening, as the twin moons rose high over the desert, Zorath stood before Kael, her face set with determination. The quiet that had once settled in her chamber was replaced with a charged atmosphere. A storm was coming, and they both felt it. "We cannot change the empire without a fight," Zorath said, her voice heavy with resolve. "I knew this day would come, Kael. The people who have benefited from my rule will not allow me to take this step forward. They will fight to keep me trapped in the past." Kael nodded. "We knew this wouldn't be easy, but we can't let them win. You've come too far, and the people of Xypheron deserve to see you for who you truly are. You've already started changing their minds. But what if it's not enough?" Zorath asked, her tone quiet, almost vulnerable. "What if they don't want the change? What if they want to see me fall?" "You can't let fear stop you," Kael replied, his voice unwavering. "Fear is exactly what's holding them back. It's the reason they keep you locked in this cage of power. You have to show them that you are more than just a ruler. You're the leader they need, and I'm with you." Zorath looked at him for a long moment, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "You've been my strength, Kael. I would not be standing here, ready to fight for the future, without you." Kael smiled. "Then we fight together." The final decision had been made. Zorath would confront her enemies head-on, not with force, but with the strength she had discovered within herself. She would show them that she was not the untouchable queen they had feared for so long. She was a ruler who had learned the true meaning of leadership, the courage to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. As the days passed, word spread that Zorath was no longer the isolated, untouchable queen. She had started rallying her most loyal supporters, those who believed in the change she was bringing. They stood beside her, ready to defend the new vision she had for the empire. But, as expected, there were those who refused to accept it, and they would fight to the bitter end to ensure the status quo remained. One night, as the city of Xypheron prepared for battle, Kael and Zorath stood together at the edge of the palace, gazing out at the vast desert that stretched before them. "We have no choice now," Zorath said, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "They are coming for me. They are coming for us, and we must be ready. Kael placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. We're ready. We've been ready for this. You've made your choice, and so have I. Together, we'll face whatever comes. The storm of battle was inevitable. Zorath knew that the coming fight would not just be for her throne, but for the very soul of her empire. This was a fight for the future, a fight for a kingdom that could be built on trust, unity, and understanding. As the first sign of dawn broke over the desert, casting its soft light on the city of Xypheron, the final stand began. The enemies of the queen moved toward the palace, their forces strong and numerous. But Zorath, with Kael by her side, was ready. The battle raged for hours, a clash of wills, power, and ideals. Zorath fought fiercely, her movements as precise and calculated as ever, but this time there was a difference. She wasn't just fighting for her own survival. She was fighting for the future she believed in, for the people she had once feared to trust. Kael, too, fought with all his strength, standing by her side as they faced wave after wave of their enemies. The odds seemed stacked against them, but Kael had never once doubted Zorath. Her strength was no longer in her power over others, it was in her courage, in her willingness to fight for something greater than herself. And in the end, it was this courage that turned the tide. As the final enemy forces were defeated, Zorath stood victorious. The battle had been hard, and the cost had been high, but she had proven that even the most untouchable ruler could be brought down by the power of human connection, by the willingness to break free from fear and isolation. As the dust settled, and the people of Xypheron looked on, they saw not just a queen but a leader who had dared to change, who had chosen to fight for a future where trust and compassion were stronger than fear. Zorath turned to Kael, her expression filled with both exhaustion and triumph. "We did it," she whispered. Kael nodded, his eyes filled with pride. Yes, we did. Together, they had faced the impossible, and together they had forged a new beginning for Xypherona, beginning that was built on more than just power. It was built on understanding, on trust, and on the belief that even the most untouchable could find a way to connect, to change, and to lead.